If I had to share this one recipe that makes me think of summer in Georgia, this is probably it. These are cheesy grit bowls that have sweet and smoky maple tofu, roasted okra with red bell peppers, all on a bed of cheesy grits. The first step to this recipe is to marinate the tofu, so let's get started. So I am using a 1/4 cup of maple syrup, 1/4 cup of soy sauce. You can use reduced sodium soy sauce to cut down on the salt in this recipe, or use tamari to make it gluten-free. 1 tablespoon of sriracha and 1 tablespoon of oil. Now I have heard that there may be a sriracha shortage coming up or happening, so if you really can't find sriracha, you can use half as much hot sauce or just adjust to taste, or use garlic chili sauce and omit the garlic powder. So we're using a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. I think a smoky flavor is one of those things that's often left out of plant-based cooking because we're not going around smoking our tofu all the time. So one easy way to add smoke, other than liquid smoke, which I don't love, it can overpower dishes so quickly, I like adding smoked paprika. We're also adding 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast, and then I like to add a little bit of apple cider vinegar for some tang. Whisk it all together. And then for the tofu, instead of pressing it, I like to just wrap it in this towel. Don't press it so hard that it falls apart, just enough to get some of that moisture out in lieu of pressing it with a tofu press. And this will double as a way for our cutting board to not slip around. I'm gonna slice this into triangles. Best way to do this is going to be to slice it in half, cut it in half, and then cut it in half again. And from here, you can just come through and slice it in half. One of the reasons I really like doing it this way, and I've talked about this in a past video for barbecue tofu, is that these edges are going to cook a lot faster than the center, so you end up with some crispy edges, which add a little extra texture to the tofu. And now we add the tofu to the marinade. Just use a spatula to make sure that all those pieces of tofu are well coated. So we can set this aside to marinate for about 15 minutes. If you had some forethought, you could definitely marinate it overnight. Now these aren't from my garden just yet because it is only June and everything in there is kind of small. But soon enough, I'm hoping I can make this recipe with all homegrown veggies. Hopefully you can too. So I'm gonna cut these red peppers just into not too thick strips. The nice thing about this recipe is that you can really use any kind of summer veggie here. So I'm using these bell peppers and then my all-time favorite, okra. If you've never had okra you like, you gotta try this because roasting okra to me is the best way to eat it. It gets it really nice and crispy on the inside without any slime. And what we'll do with this okra is just slice off that top and then slice it in half. Leave this part on because it gets super nice and crispy. You can use frozen okra if you don't have okra in season or if it's not common where you live. If you're using frozen okra, I recommend letting it thaw first. I do have a whole post just about how to roast okra, so I'll leave that down below if you want some more tips. Now I'm just gonna drizzle 1 tablespoon or so of olive oil, just enough to coat. And when you cook as much as I do, you do go through this pretty quickly. Highly recommend a big jug of olive oil. And then just toss it all together. Make sure it's all well coated in that olive oil. We are going to roast this at quite a high heat, 425 degrees Fahrenheit. This makes it so that things get a little bit blackened, which just brings that whole smoky flavor together in this bowl. We'll cook it for about 15 to 20 minutes. And while that is roasting, we can make the grits. So I am using old-fashioned grits, and I'm going to add 1 cup to 4 cups of boiling water, as well as half a teaspoon of salt. Stir everything together and reduce the heat to low. It's only going to take about 10 to 15 minutes to cook the grits. Keep an eye on them and do make sure to stir them every 3 to 4 minutes. As soon as they've absorbed all of the water, they are ready to go. And I always add in at least 3 to 4 tablespoons of butter. Since this is a vegan recipe, I'm using vegan butter. And I'm also adding an extra splash of soy milk. I'm also adding a 1/4 cup of nutritional yeast for that cheesy flavor. But after the tofu has marinated for about 15 minutes, we're going to cook it, and I love using my cast iron pan for this because it adds its own layer of flavor. So add enough oil to coat the bottom of that skillet. Heat the pan over medium. Unless you have a really large pan, I recommend cooking the tofu in 2 to 3 batches. This will give it enough space in the pan to crisp up. So we'll start by cooking the tofu for just 2 to 3 minutes on each side. You want it to get a little bit of blackening going, and then after 2 to 3 minutes, you'll flip it and repeat the process. Then we will add that marinade. So since this is only half the batch, I'm gonna add about half of the marinade, and it's gonna cook really quickly from this point. You basically want the tofu to get almost blackened. Okay, so this cooked for about 15 minutes total, and here's what you want it to look like. We have this golden brown exterior, so it's going to be a little crispy and crunchy, especially at the tail, but the inside is still tender and a little moist, but not slimy, never slimy. And just as this was finishing, so were the grits. Here's the thing about grits. They soak up a lot of liquid. Even after they are done soaking up liquid, they continue to soak up liquids. So to combat that, even though I've already added some soy milk, some butter, and nutritional yeast, I'm gonna add a little more soy milk. Salty, smoky, a little bit sweet, very savory, definitely a little bit of spice in there. And the blackening on the tofu just brings everything together because it really emphasizes that smoky point that I like define Southern food by. So you could add fresh corn, eggplant, different varieties of peppers, and the best thing would be tomatoes if you have an abundance of tomatoes in your garden. I'm not there quite yet, but soon enough, this recipe is gonna be chock full of summer veggies when I make it at home. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. It's definitely the first of many summer recipes to come. If you're new here, you can hit subscribe because I share new recipes on this channel most weeks. And they're always vegetarian, often vegan, and always delicious. If you gave this recipe a try, I'd love to hear from you, so you can leave a comment down below. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up if you like this video, and I'll be back next week with another summer favorite.